today from the second octave, the fourth chapter, Fedora, and I'm reading you verse 2 from my bathroom for some strange reason, but here I am. Verse 2. The longest, strangest and most complex journey I ever took, I think, was the one down the aisle before and after my wedding ceremony at St Dominic's Catholic Church in Camberwell on Australia Day 1971. Only a coincidence though. One warm November spring day we'd sat in the Carlton Gardens and decided to fix a date. We were simply trying to find the most anonymous day on which we could be married, and we settled on a Tuesday in late January. The 26th we thought sounded vague enough. It was only later we found out that it had turned out to be the most unanonymous day in Australia's calendar. It was a very hot afternoon. St Dominic's thick bluestone walls kept the inside of the church cool. I got there early with the best man. The church was empty. I sat down at the back alone and thought about my life. I remembered many years before this day gliding past the church on the tram with my father. He'd taken a house painting job on, and I was unquestioningly conscripted to help him. St Dominic's tall spires had stuck in my mind, probably because of the church's position at the top of the hill on Riversdale Road. Its classical proportions and its stained glass, huge front window were very beautiful. All these things had riveted me to the tram's window that day and made those few house painting weekends in Camberwell nobler somehow. And now, here I was, sitting in the back pew waiting for my future wife. The journey up the aisle lasted a long time. I was conscious of it being the last journey I'd take as a single man. I tried to feel the tremendous change that was about to come into my life, but it simply refused to make itself seen or heard. I was just inside an empty suburban church on a very hot Tuesday, and no matter how hard I tried to feel the significance of the occasion, the anonymity we'd sought for it successfully, as it turned out, proved insurmountable because it was a holiday. There was no traffic, people stayed home with the heat. Anyway, not a car passed. Inside the church, it was so quiet until people started arriving, and before I knew it, the bride was walking slowly up the aisle with her father by her side. I can't remember much else except that the journey back towards the church's front doors was very, very slow. People standing on the sides of the aisle floated by us as in a dream, some whispering, some shouting encouragement, congratulations, all smiling happily. I remember looking up at the stained glass window and wondering what had happened to the boy that had happily sung Somewhere Over the Rainbow along with Billy Thorpe in that empty Camberwell kitchen from morning till night, as he painted skirting boards, door frames, window ledges. What had happened between riding up on the tram to Brighton with my father that evening past this very church, all lit up brightly, and this very moment between that moment and this one. Suddenly I couldn't stop looking at that stained glass window, and I had to raise my head as I slowly walked under it. St Dominic's eyes followed every step of mine towards the front door, out onto Riversdale Road, and into the blinding sun of that Australia Day Tuesday. Second octave, fifth chapter, Zoe, second verse. On my second day in New Plymouth, I woke early. I wanted to buy a newspaper and some milk. I didn't know where anything was, so I went up the hill to the closest corner and saw that the street crossing Dover Street was called Lemon Street. I liked the name, so I began to walk. Immediately I came upon a front yard covered with personal possessions of all kinds. Some children were carrying things out of a small house and placing them onto a paved driveway, all sorts of things. I couldn't seem to move and I watched for a while. A man in his 30s came out. "You're early," he said. "The sale doesn't start for another hour." His tone became cheerful as he added, "You want anything?" I looked at the driveway. The children were arranging dolls and toys in little groups. Among them was a small high chair, obviously handmade. I stood watching. The cheerfulness gave way to a stubborn silence. "Where are you off to?" I eventually asked. "Nowhere," he said. "I just got given notice." After a minute, in a lower tone, he added, "We just need to sell everything." "How much for the high chair?" I inquired, disbelieving my own ears. What was I going to do with a high chair? $25, he said, looking at the children. The youngest put a teddy bear in the seat. It looked like it belonged. "And the teddy?" I said. What was I doing? He looked at his child and said, "What do you think? $10? She replied tentatively, looking directly at me. She then placed what was obviously Teddy's best friend, a little stuffed dog, next to Teddy. I got a little nervous. Perhaps I was just excited, so I just breathed deeply. All the toys were now stacked in neat rows. The sun was beginning to shine on the rooftops of houses. I glanced around. It was then that I saw a high, conical mountain for the first time. Its peak was covered with snow. I couldn't believe my eyes. Its form was perfect. In the meantime, the children had gathered armfuls of dolls and toys from inside, and when I turned back, they were standing close to me, looking back at the piles of things now gathered in the yard. Everything seemed so colourful and joyous. I looked again at the mountain peak, reflecting clear sunlight. "How about the lot?" I said suddenly. He gaped. The children smiled. "The lot?" "Yes, how about the lot? How much?" No one said anything. Father and daughters looked at each other for what seemed an eternity. He couldn't bear to speak. Finally, the youngest said softly, $1,000? Everybody laughed. 85, he said, smiling broadly. He helped me carry everything home in a big cardboard box. The girls came too, and they laid the toys down in my living room in a neat row against the wall so that each doll could see what was in the room and who was coming in and out. "I'm glad they're all together," the oldest girl whispered as they left. I went past that house every morning during my stay in New Plymouth, but I never saw them again. Occasionally, as I took a walk in the early evening, the lights would be on and I would hear music coming from the kitchen. Often, a man's voice, speaking in easy tones, would be similarly answered by a woman's. Sometimes, as children spoke, there would be laughter. Until tomorrow, for the completion of the second octave, 5th chapter, Zoe. Keynote is Ray and the colour is orange. Thank you for listening. I wish you a delightful afternoon.